What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Tarik LaCour, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com and the Hook'em Horn Show. We're coming back at y'all today with our Texas-Mississippi State preview for the SEC opener this weekend. Also taking a look at just the SEC as a whole, some of the bigger games this weekend, and what Texas's outlook is for SEC play, and revisiting our SEC championship games predictions as well. Maybe take a look at like the playoff picture, who we feel like has the best shot to get those at-large bids in the SEC bid, but we'll see if we have time for that later. But yeah, I'll start off here for y'all. Just in general, I think non-conference play for Texas went about as well as a lot of Texas fans could have hoped, barring the injuries. Obviously, that has been a bit of a disappointment to see, the running back, safety positions, Quinn Ewers. See a lot of those guys suffering injuries here in the past few weeks, but I think Texas at least gets the bye week at a good time this year. Otherwise, 3 non-conference wins at home by margins of victory of no fewer than 48 points, double-digit win over Michigan team on the road that actually looks formidable in the Big Ten, beating USC last weekend. That one kind of took me by surprise a little bit. I thought USC had the edge there, but Michigan seems to be finding their identity of just doing nothing but running the ball. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good about this Texas team headed into SEC play. Only other thing I'll mention as far as injuries are concerned, maybe we revisit that a little bit later, taking a look at the first SEC mandated injury report, had some updates today, but Sarkisian saying in his press conference this morning that he will be making the call for the starting quarterback tomorrow. So stay tuned on the site. We'll keep you all updated for coverage for that as I've been doing throughout the week. But anyway, I'll pass it over to y'all for thoughts coming out of non-conference play, thinking about the Mississippi State game this weekend as well.
Yeah, so I'll take it. I mean, like you said, Andrew, non-con couldn't have gone any better. We all had the Michigan game circled. I mean, really coming into this season, it was a 4-game schedule, I think, for a lot of Texas fans. But I thought what was really impressive was that laser focus in the UTSA and ULM game. We've seen even just last year, it was a 1-possession game against Wyoming in the fourth quarter after that big win against Alabama. So for them to just, really hit the gas pedal, not let up, and get a lot of, the second and third teamers in, I think is big time. It also shows there's a lot of young talent on this team. PFF, released earlier today, the top 2 graded freshmen in the country are Ryan Wingo and Colin Simmons. So I think that the team is in good hands in that sense. The injury to Quinn was just really tough luck, but Arch obviously came out and proved it. I think he proved 2 things. One, that we all knew this as Tarik, the president of the Quinn Ewers fan club, and I think any sensible Texas fan knew that Quinn Ewers is QB1 no matter what. But Arch proved that he has a ton of talent, but also that he's going to have to work through some struggles of any first year starting college quarterback. So I think it all is kind of worked out perfectly, and it really is setting Texas up for a strong showing first year in SEC play. And I don't know the history, but I got to think this is one of the largest spreads in SEC history between 2 SEC games. Texas nearly a 40-point favorite. So hopefully they can hold up their end of the bargain this Saturday against a pretty banged up Mississippi State team.
Yeah, you will. I don't know if you could have really scripted the fact that Quinn Ewers would throw his first career interception in his first drive against ULM, and Arch Manning would do the same thing. That's kind of amazing. But that said, as you've already said, Shane and Andrew, it went as well as you could hope for. The injuries look like they're not season altering. So even though you have Quinn out last game and maybe Mississippi State, although he could play if needed, that's about as good as you could hope for. And if you think differently, just look across the Red River to what Oklahoma is. I don't know who they're going to be taking to Auburn at this point. So yeah, I mean, Texas has shown that their quarterback situation has got to be one of the best in the country. They also saw over the weekend that that Michigan defense that they pushed around is still very good. That Mason Graham and Grant are top 5, top 15 type picks. And I mean, sidebar, how do you lose a game when the other team only throws it for 32 yards? I mean, I don't think that's happened since Newt Rockne was coaching or something, but I digress. So I love where Texas is at. Very excited to see this game. I don't know if we're going to learn any more about this team from this game, given the nature of the opponent, but everyone is going to get up for Texas. They're going to get Texas's best shot. That said, when you're bringing in a team as bad as Mississippi State has been, and then you add to that, this will be someone making their first start at DKR. Seems a lot to overcome, but, crazier things have happened.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan last weekend. Fun fact, actually, USC had more missed tackles in run defense in the game's final 10 minutes than Michigan had passing yards. So that's probably USC's reason for losing there. They just couldn't tackle Khalil Mullings at the end of the game.
It looks going 3 years in as though the Lincoln Riley, Brent Venables hires weren't exactly the best ideas, but remains to be seen.
They're better, I think, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. Well, and Bear Alexander's now sitting out for the rest of the season. So,
but Riley was hired to get them to be nationally competitive, and that's not where they are. And Oklahoma's certainly not going to be there this year. And then they're going to be talking about in the offseason, restructuring the chairs on the Titanic. It's, we've seen this with Tom Herman and Charlie Strong. It generally doesn't work, but I digress.
To your point about just the quarterback play, and I guess from what both of y'all were saying with, Arch Manning, I think the theme of the week from Sarkisian's press conferences has been, improvement, both in regards to Quinn's injury status. He's been making day-by-day improvements, which is good to hear about, especially given the nature of his injury, one that, abdominal injuries for a throwing position in sports can be something that it sticks with you for months on end. Like it can take an entire offseason to feel better from that sort of injury. I remember baseball, lacrosse, hockey, golf, different sports growing up that either I played or friends played. If you had that sort of like oblique injury, you would be limited for a long time. So it's good to hear that Quinn, is progressing at the rate he is. And you got the bye week. If he doesn't play this week, then you get him back against OU and what is about less than 2.5 weeks from now. So, I mean, we'll figure out tomorrow if Quinn's going to go. It sounds like he really is pushing to play.
I will be at Red River, so he has to start that game.
Sure.
Ironically, I've been at both games in DKR when he's gotten hurt. I was at the Alabama game, and
you gotta stop going to games.
Yeah.
The other point I was making though about the quarterbacks for a theme of the week, Shane, you were kind of alluding to that. There's Arch's kind of mindset. Sarkisian praised him this week in one of his press conferences for showing that resiliency, short memory after coming back from throwing an interception on the first drive of the game last weekend. Leading Texas on, I believe it was a half dozen scoring drives, maybe it was 5, somewhere in that ballpark. But he threw 2 interceptions last weekend, but I would say really that first one was the only one that's on him completely. I think he probably could have put the ball a little bit more on Jaden Blue's hands or numbers on that second interception, but also Jaden Blue should probably catch that ball. And you get an unfortunate deflection that ends up going pretty much right to a ULM defender. So all in all, for Texas, you'd like to see those interceptions as a whole be knocked down a bit. But for this weekend, I think regardless if it's Arch or Quinn, you should be able to get in a good rhythm. This is a Mississippi State defense, and I'll harp on this a little bit more later, but this is a Mississippi State defense that's struggling in every phase of the game right now. They're a little bit banged up in the secondary. Secondary has been struggling to begin with outside of, one of their starting nickel and one of their safeties. Their they're really not doing great back there. I think the play is kind of underwhelmed for them a little bit. If you asked anyone on the Mississippi State camp, they would agree. Linebacker play has been mediocre at best, and the defensive line has edge rushers. They've been okay. But again, this is a Mississippi State team that lost, what was it, 41-24, 41-17, something like that to a MAC school a few weeks ago at home. Mississippi State's lost 3 games in a row. They've yet to beat an FBS opponent this season. I think for Texas, this is a game this weekend. Shane, you mentioned it. I don't know if it's the largest spread ever. Vanderbilt's still in the SEC. I'm sure that there have been some pretty massive spreads for those games. But, on a serious note, Texas 37.5 point favorite. Last I checked on FanDuel Sportsbook. So, I think that for Texas, despite the injuries, this is still a game where you can get a lot of guys that aren't, really worried about burning their red shirts. You can still get a lot of those guys out on the field this weekend. Hopefully you can get up big and early in this game, because I think you have the ability to set the tone in this game a lot better than Mississippi State does on offense, because of kind of that one-dimensional nature of Mississippi State's offense. They're down their starting quarterback. There's any number of reasons I could get to, but without progressing on too much on that rabbit hole, I'll start here for the Mississippi State game this weekend. Beyond the quarterback play, I'm really interested to see how we're able to get the ball out. Really to the wide receivers in this one, because we're so banged up at running back. I don't know how much we're going to learn about the ground game. I think the offensive line should be able to hold up really well for the quarterback as well. What are y'all looking for from the offense in this game?
I think that even though we are very limited with our depth at running back, due to the nature of the offensive line, I want to see us keep running the ball and controlling the game, especially so if Arch Manning is in the game. So you can kind of shorten the game and just impose your will, that you can just move the ball when you need to at your pace and make them play your game. That's what I'd like to see in this game. And also, though, Jeff Lebby is going to give you a good taste of what we'll see in Red River. Now, they're not running a veer and shoot. They're using a more traditional air raid, but the way they like to play with that wide open spread is going to be something to be prepped.
Are you talking about OU with the veer and shoot, or
no? I'm talking about Mississippi State.
Okay.
Well, that's what Lebby uses, the veer and shoot. Well, kind of a veer and shoot. Not quite. It's a kind of a knockoff, but it's similar enough to it's going to be it'll be a good warm up for what you'll see versus OU. Although, especially because their quarterback they have now will run more, and I expect Hawkins to run a lot more than Arnold did. Probably because that's all Hawkins can really do. But so that'll be a good test for the defense. We do need to get some more sacks, though. We're not getting enough of those.
Yeah, I think, Tarik, you make a good point about imposing your will. I think this Mississippi State team, especially on the lines of scrimmage, is not a typical SEC team. They probably look more like our former Big 12 foes than what we'll face a lot of the rest of the season. But it is still your first game in the SEC, and Sark's been preparing this team, especially in the trenches, to play in the SEC. So if Texas wants to be considered the top dog in the conference, I think you should go out there and really just push this Mississippi State team around. And I think, the injuries to the running backs definitely hurt to the room as a whole, but I felt like the running game really hasn't been clicking super well. Like in the past 2 games, you've been pretty consistently getting, 4 to 6 yards a carry, but they harped on the broadcast a lot last week. The longest run of the season was 20 something yards. I'd really like to see whether it's Jaden Blue or maybe even Ryan Niblett, break one and just keep pounding them and going at them. And Andrew, you made a good point that given the lack of depth at the running back position, I think you could see a lot of 4 wide and really use some jet motion and some screen passes as your pseudo run game. So I think the whole season, what I've really liked is the fact that Sark is really spreading the ball out. We've talked about in previous seasons, he has his 3, sometimes 4 wide receivers that he really goes to. But, there are 6 guys that we talked about at the top that it's not even evenly spread through the six, but all six, have made an impact. So I'd like to see that continue as well. But yeah, I think all eyes are on the offense, and my thoughts on the defense. Really, I mean, just avoid the gashes. There's been some run plays where the linebackers have lost their gap schemes, and I think we just kind of want to avoid those big plays because those are the ones that can get you beat against a more quality opponent.
Yeah, I mean, for this game, and Shane, you make an interesting point about the explosive plays or lack thereof for the ground game. I think there's probably two reasons for that. It's something that I had actually highlighted in an article last weekend. I think the running back injuries have a big role to play there. I mean, you look at the personnel, like Jaden Blue I would say is probably your best big play guy. He's your fastest running back, had the most explosive plays last year after the Jonathan Brooks injury. I think the ankle sprain has probably hampered his explosiveness a good bit, especially on the, those one cuts get to the outside that he likes to do. I think you're seeing Jaden Blue run the ball really hard, but I think on a lot of those cuts, it's not quite the same explosiveness yet. I think he'll probably get closer to that after the bye week. But you play some really physical defenses out of the bye week too. So, Jaden Blue, I think it's nice to see him getting involved in the ground game in different ways, making an impact. Like y'all were saying, some of those like 5, 6, 7 yard runs, maybe not those large explosive plays, but Jaden Blue showing the versatility that he can be that 25 carry, 125-yard guy that Sark really likes as that bell cow back. 4 touchdowns last weekend, really had a career day getting in the end zone. I think Wisner could be a big play threat too. He's someone that's pretty quick to the outside, had some explosive plays from what I saw during his junior and senior years at DeSoto. I mean, he can bring that explosive element. Again, just injuries have limited him. And then if you look at Jared Gibson, I mean, Tarik, was it you last week that said that it almost sometimes looks like Jared Gibson's trying to run into the defender? I thought someone had said that on the show. Either way, for Jared Gibson though, I like how physical he runs, but I also don't think he's really your explosive big play threat. He's more of your guy zone run game, run between the tackles. That said, focusing on the Texas offense versus the Mississippi State defense at a high level, I kind of said it. It might have been Paul Wadlington that pointed this out earlier this week in an article. Mississippi State ranks 130th in the FBS in defensive success rate. Texas ranks 5th in the nation in offensive success rate. I mean, the quality of opponents have been outside of Michigan have been roughly equal because Mississippi State played some okay, P4 teams. But, at every level of the defense, Mississippi State has some flaws that Texas can attack and pick apart. I mean, Mississippi State does have smaller corners, and I think their secondary communication has been lacking early this season. Their safeties, they have a nickel too that can hit you pretty hard defending the run. I think that they're probably going to devote an extra defender closer to the box because they've struggled to defend the run so much early this season, second to last in the SEC in yards before contact. So they're really getting moved off the football effectively, whether it was Arizona State, Toledo even, definitely Florida. So I think, and then, if you can set the tone on the ground in this game, I think that you can pass it around and you can really attack them at all levels. I mean, obviously, Arch Manning has a great deep ball. I mentioned this last week. Among explosive plays, made up 210 of his 58 passing yards last weekend. So, really that deep pass to take the top off the defense. And then you can work in some stuff underneath, find different creative ways to get guys like Silas Bolden, Ryan Wingo the ball. Ryan Niblett, he got his first career touchdown, I believe, last weekend. Get him in the game. I also think that for the Texas offense, I just in general, I'd like to see them be able to take care of the football. Let's get out of one game without a turnover. I think that'd be a really good way to head into the bye week. This Mississippi State defense has not really been good at forcing turnovers this season either. So as a whole, I think there's two guys you kind of got to watch out for on this Mississippi State defense. Safety Isaac Smith, I think he's 3rd in the nation in tackles. Again, someone that's making an average, or his average depth of tackle and run defense is about 7 yards. They also do move him up into the box from time to time to play there, but they also do that with another one of their, I'm losing the name of their starting nickel, but he's another quality, like kind of physical player that they have in the secondary. Their starting nickel and Isaac Smith are first and third on the team in tackles. So they really rely on those guys to play a really physical brand of football. And I do think you're going to see them playing heavier boxes at times at the outset of this game, depending on how Texas is kind of spreading them out to start. For the defense, I mean, I think the Mississippi State offense is better than their defense. That said, Mississippi State is working through some really critical injuries right now. Tarik, you mentioned it. Lebby has kind of a brand of veer and shoot offense off of that traditional Art Briles veer and shoot from the late 2000s that was developed there. And I mean, I think that Lebby plays a little bit more up tempo. He likes to use wider splits than you would probably see in a traditional Art Briles offense. And honestly, there's just a lot of short passes. I think that's mostly used to maximize the personnel that Mississippi State has. They do have some quality receivers, Kevin Coleman being the main one. I think he's the biggest threat you have to worry about in this game because he is so dangerous after the catch. And they do a lot of things to get him the ball out in space. He leads the SEC in targets on receiving yards and yards after the catch on short routes. He's got over 150 yards after the catch already on short routes this season. So you got to be careful with his explosiveness. He's someone that can burn you if you kind of, lose where he is on the field or you're not sound in pass coverage. And I mean, that said, I don't know. I mean, I think Mississippi State, their offense is going to be in flux this week. Blake Shapen, Baylor transfer. I'm sure a lot of Texas fans familiar with that name. Transferred to Mississippi State this offseason, got off to a pretty good start. Just in terms of how he was grading out and leading this offense. Their pass game has really been the strength of the not just the entire offense, but the team, I think, this season. It's really kept them alive in a lot of games. Come back against Arizona State, led by multiple long drives stemmed by the pass. Even the success they did have against Toledo was mostly through the air on offense. So Blake Shapen suffered a shoulder injury late in the game last weekend against Florida. He's out for the season, I believe. So now Mississippi State turned into a true freshman backup. Guys,
not that it would have mattered. We destroyed him at Baylor. It wouldn't have been any different at Mississippi State. He would just have a different colored jersey on.
I do think there's some validity to that, just in the sense that Mississippi State's offense has been pretty one-dimensional this entire season. That said, I think it probably changes the calculus of how Jeff Lebby's going to run this game, because I think you're probably looking at more design quarterback runs and also probably even more quick passes. This is already an offense that operates on the short passing game, but
okay. If I were Jeff Lebby, I would take a look to the west and look at what Lincoln Riley just did, running right at Graham and Grant, and seeing how that didn't work. Probably running your quarterback into the arms of Anthony Hill, not a good idea. You already have one guy out for the season. You don't want two guys out within 2 weeks.
That's true. I mean, to some degree, you got to take advantage of what you got. But also, yeah, I would agree. I mean, he looked, pull up the name, name's escaping me here, but their freshman quarterback looked all right last weekend. I thought he did pretty well, picked up some yards scrambling. Michael Van Buren is his name. I think he had somewhere like 75 passing yards, so nothing crazy there. But again, he's pretty elusive. It's just something Texas is going to have to watch this weekend. But again, I think with you having the faster edge rushers, Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, Barron Sorrell, that you'll be able to contain him pretty well. And also, yeah, I mean, with guys like David Benda, Mo Blackwell, Leon Galafal playing really well, I think, early this season too. And then obviously Anthony Hill and all the speed and just dynamism that he brings to the table for this defense in so many phases. May I say Anthony Hill, the highest graded coverage defender in the SEC early this season. I think that might be a little bit skewed just because he's had so many tackles around the line of scrimmage with teams trying to get their guys out in space because they're not finding success throwing downfield against Texas. So they have to kind of make things more shallow. But still, I mean, Anthony Hill come leaps and bounds in pass coverage since last year. playing a more difficult position, might I add, for that. So that said, I'm not really concerned about that much. I think Mississippi State will probably try some things over the top. Again, they got some speedy guys. You got a true freshman at quarterback. That seems to be a logical move to try to, get some big plays, get them settled in, get the chains moving. Mississippi State's ground game though has been pretty stagnant. They rank 16th in the SEC in run game success rate against FBS opponents. They don't really have any clear go-to running back either, and Texas has been pretty good defending the run. I think early this season, they haven't been the same they were last year, obviously. Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy plugging things on the inside made them an elite run defense. But this year, the linebacker play has been really good. And, the defensive line's been good. Edge rushers have been good. So, I think that this is a game where Texas could potentially go without allowing another touchdown. They've only allowed 2 touchdowns this season. We'll see if Mississippi State's able to pop off maybe an explosive play or two. This offense still has some playmakers in the receiving core. But, yeah, I think this will be a pretty dominant game for the Texas defense. I don't know if y'all have anything to add on that front.
Nope.
I mean, overall, it does feel a little underwhelming for the SEC opener. Yeah, I know that we got OU and Georgia coming up here in a few weeks, but Mississippi State has gotten out to a pretty slow start. They've had kind of a rough go at things just in general as a program the last few years. And, I think Levy's still got his work cut out for him for the next few years, just because, unless this Van Buren kid is going to be a really good long-term quarterback, I don't see, the long-term direction here. There, transfers being so much of a large makeup of this team. They have 11 new starters on offense this year.
Jackson Arnold will be the starter there next year. When we go to Starkville, he'll be the guy.
I've seen that float around on Twitter once or twice this week.
Well, there's no real way back. They can't really. You go back to him like it's kind of a broken situation, and Levy loves him. That's why he went there. There you go.
And it's gonna be I think at this point it's not a foregone conclusion, but unless like Michael Hawkins gets hurt or something, and then Jackson Arnold comes back and really just completely turns it around the second half of the season, I don't see how you hang on to Jackson Arnold after last Saturday. Brent Venables pretty much just hung him out to dry. But anyway, we can talk about the SEC here in a bit as a whole. Let's go and get score predictions for this game. Tarik, start with you.
Okay. Do we need to give 2 score predictions, like one if Quinn plays, one if Hart starts?
Sure. Why not?
Okay, that was kind of a joke, but I guess I'll give 2 score predictions. I'm messing around because probably by the time you can if you want to. Probably by the time I post this tomorrow, we're gonna have an answer of the starter. Regardless of who starts, I think Texas will break 40 points again. Let's go 45-10.
All right, Shane.
I'm going to go pretty similar, 44-13. I think the Mississippi State defense, the ones, middle of the pack metric that they've had this season is opponent red zone scoring. So I think especially with the lack of running backs, could see Texas has been great in the red zone this year, but you could see that last year issue, come to the forefront again in this game. So I'm thinking 5 touchdowns, 3 field goals, 44, and Mississippi State gets on the board with 13.
Okay. I'm gonna go 52-10. I just think this Mississippi State defense, Isaac Smith, their best player on defense, looks like he's going to be good to go this weekend, but he's been dealing with a couple of injuries early this season. In general, I just don't think I just don't see where unless they hit a couple of explosives in this game, I don't see how they're really going to attack this Texas defense. Just again, most of their receivers are either young or kind of, one-dimensional. Got some fast guys. Their tight end, Traore, is a decent receiver. He's pretty athletic, but not a good blocker and kind of an unpolished route runner. As a whole, I just don't see where Mississippi State's really going to attack them. I do think they'll probably get off for 1 touchdown. They do have enough weapons where I could see that happening. But yeah, I think that I also think that actually, to counter your point, Shane, I actually think Texas's red zone offense is going to be really good in this game. I think Sark's going to be out to make a point in the SEC. So, but that's fair. I mean, I think the Mississippi State might try to play a brand of bend but don't break defense in this game just because they probably know they're going to get hit relentlessly by this Texas offense. So let me pull up from last week. Tarik, I believe I'm going to start doing a scoreboard. I need to start making that like a thing between like the YouTube predictions and then like the site predictions because we got a few more people to get the site predictions up. Let's see, at least for last week, I predicted 51-6. Shane, you had 48-13. Tarik, didn't you get like an extra prediction that I couldn't find? I remember you said 70-0, and then you were like, and then you decided to change or something.
Yeah, I did. I can't. It was a shutout though, but I can't remember what the score was.
Like 56-0, maybe. Anyway, I
actually the score last week was it 51-3.
Yeah, so either way, I was able to get the closest one last week, so I get my first notch of the season. I've been kind of close, but yeah, Shane, I know you have one. Tarik, you have 1 or 2 just for the YouTube show, but for the site, Brian actually hit the nail on the head for, I think it was the UTSA game. So
I figured with all the good results that Tarik would be crushing because he's always got.
He got the Michigan one, definitely.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I can't remember who got the season opener. I would have to.
We're sweating that game for absolutely no reason.
That's fair. I mean, I'll take it. Like I said it during that video, I'm fine being wrong on those weeks.
Yeah.
So, okay. Let's move into talking about the SEC as a whole now. I wanted to really quickly, just for some of the bigger games, get y'all's predictions on them. I mean, it's outside of the Texas game. I think there's some pretty big games around the SEC this weekend, obviously highlighted by Georgia at Alabama. Right now, Georgia's still a 1-point favorite, which I do find a little bit interesting. I think that Alabama has a slightly better chance in that game just because of their explosive passing game and kind of the lack of outside weapons. I mentioned that before for Georgia. Still got questions about their ground game. Granted, both teams are coming off a bye week, so I think we're going to see some really interested scripted stuff on offense and, potentially on defense too for each team. I think Georgia's going to be well prepared to try to handle what Alabama brings to that game. So I personally think that Alabama wins that one by 7. Are both y'all picking Alabama in that one?
I'm going Georgia.
Roll Tide, roll.
All right. Interesting.
I think.
Wait, is that game? Is that in Tuscaloosa?
It's in Tuscaloosa, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think Kirby's going to get got twice in a row against. Jalen Milroe. He looked great in spurts against Wisconsin, especially right at the end of the half. And he's scary, but not against the best defense in the country. And Kirby has the film from December last year. I think he's going to be able to bottle him up. Jalen Milroe will hit a couple deep balls. But honestly, outside of Ryan Williams, which is crazy because he's 17 years old, I'm not totally sold on Alabama's skill players. So I think it's going to be a low scoring game, and I think Beck doesn't turn the ball over, and it'll be something like a 24-20 Georgia.
I actually think that one of the reasons why Alabama can be so dynamic in this game still is because I think their ground game's a little underrated. I think that since Jam Miller got back, they've been really good on the ground. I think he really is a really quality back. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Milroe, I would agree with you, Shane. I do think that, Georgia's secondary is really good. And they're like, 2 NFL corners, including a possible first-round pick in 2025. They'll be prepared for that downfield Alabama passing game. But I do think that Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, if Alabama is able to do anything in the short and intermediate passing game, if Georgia really shuts things down deep, if they're able to keep it pretty balanced with a good ground game, then, that'll really change, I think, a lot of the dynamic of this game and how Georgia prepared. That said, yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see how Georgia's able to, make up for any lack of explosiveness with, maybe getting Trevor Etienne involved in different ways, or, trying to find a way to run the ball here, because Alabama's defensive front isn't what it was, but that's still a quality front seven. So, other games in the SEC this weekend, one that I find really interesting at this point is the A&M Arkansas game. I know that game can get weird, and I don't have much faith at all in A&M's offense. Even their defense has been really hot and cold this season. But Arkansas, I think, is a pretty good. I think they have a pretty good offense, and they got some size up front. Like, Arkansas can be a really hard offense to deal with because Taylor Green, he's really big but can move really well, like 6'5", but is a pretty elusive guy.
If Bobby Petrino beats Texas A&M right after leaving, that's gonna be so funny.
Taylor Green's like one of the funniest players in college football. Like
he throws some bad interceptions.
He's a must watch. He's a must watch.
Yeah, him and John Mateer
are
just two of the most wild card dual threat quarterbacks.
Yep.
This season, yeah. But no, and Jaquindon Jackson, I mean, is a stud at running back. So I'm interested to see how Arkansas prepares for that A&M defense. Tarik, like you said, Bobby Petrino, I mean, I'm sure he's going to have some stuff ready to go here. I thought Auburn was pretty well prepared to face Arkansas, at least on defense last weekend. But Arkansas still found a way to get it done. They got some quality receivers too. Luke Haas at tight end, Andrew Armstrong at receiver. Arkansas's offense, not too bad. Their defense, I don't know as much about them yet, but I think it'll be interesting to see how they handle Marcel Reed in that A&M offense that still, I think, has a lot of room to grow. Who are y'all picking in that game? I'm actually going with Arkansas.
A&M always finds a way to win that game, so I'll just it's like the Cowboys and the Giants. Even when it doesn't make any sense, the Cowboys find a way to win that game. So I'll say the same with A&M. I mean, was it Jimbo Fisher 2022 when they missed that weird field? Arkansas.
In Jerry World.
They outplayed them the entire game and still couldn't get the win. I was just like, come on.
Yeah, it's always a funky game. I'm gonna go A&M too. I just think, not to look too far down the road, but I think that when Texas and A&M square off, I think that A&M's gonna be like 8-3, and the whole week leading up, it's gonna be like, oh, if we beat a top 3 Texas team, we're definitely in the playoff, and we're gonna have to deal with all that nonsense. So I think they find a way to win this game and kind of stick around and be nationally relevant for most of the season.
I think A&M really struggles when they have to defend a team that has multiple dynamics to their offense. Like, I think if Arkansas can establish the run game somehow in this one, I get it. A&M's defensive line is good, but A&M has been prone, weirdly so, to giving up explosives this season, especially in fourth quarters. I really thought they'd be a little bit more buttoned up with Mike Elko there. Being a defensive first head coach, maybe that's going to take some time, but A&M ranks in the bottom 5 in the SEC in giving up fourth quarter explosives. And that's against a pretty easy schedule in terms of the offenses they faced. I'm interested to see how that builds in with Arkansas having, again, some of those weapons on the outside, Taylor Green, the ability to get the ball out, deep passing game. So, but also, yeah, this is a rivalry game, weird things. And it's the last one that's going to be played at a neutral. Well, I don't know about a neutral site, but it's the last one that's going to be played at Jerry World. So, the other one I wanted,
which has never made sense, by the way.
No, it hasn't. It's not even. I mean, I guess it's kind of in the middle, but not really. I don't know. I mean, where would the middle be? Like Texarkana?
I was in Dallas for the last A&M Arkansas game. Not there to see that game. I was just in the area. I can't remember why. But, I will say Arkansas fans, even though I was a Texas fan wearing Texas gear, they were extremely nice, even though I could not understand a word they were saying. And it must be one toothbrush to every 5,000 people in the state of Arkansas. But, they're nice. They're nice, hearty folk. Now, once you cross the border into Arkansas, maybe things were different. But at least when they're here, they're good.
Sure. The OU Auburn game. I don't think it's going to be a super fun game to watch by any means because both passing games have been horrendous this season. OU just doesn't have any receivers healthy at this point, to be honest. Michael Hawkins, I see a lot of hope for OU fans right now because of Michael Hawkins, but like, I gotta say, what are you expecting him to do?
They're putting him into a no-win situation because they're basically putting him behind an offensive line that's terrible, and he's a smaller guy, so he can just get hurt on that. He has no one to throw to. Even if they win,
and he got banged up in the fourth quarter last week already.
Right, but I'm just saying, even if you beat Auburn, what did you really prove? It's like you could make the argument that Auburn is so bad that if Jackson Arnold couldn't beat them, then you could bench him. That's what I would have done. I would have given it one more week. At least you would have a fresh quarterback when you came out to Red River, because at least you have the spirit of Red River where nothing makes sense anyway, and you just hope it falls upon Michael Hawkins like the dew fall from heaven, and that he just has an amazing game. Which, we've seen that. We've just seen crazy games. But what I hope happens in this game, actually, is I hope that Arch Manning starts and that Casey Thompson starts and that Casey leads them to a really big lead. And then we bench Arch Manning, we bring Quinn Ewers off the bench, and then he leads us to victory in the fourth quarter. I think that would be poetic justice against Casey Thompson. It would just be a great story, just for old time's sake.
Or getting into his conspiracy phase.
It's not a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. It's I'd like to see it's happening. It's not I believe it's going to happen.
Let me ask y'all this. Do you think that this is the easiest game remaining? Here, I'll share the schedule on my screen here. But do y'all think that this is the easiest remaining game on OU schedule? Among SEC opponents, obviously, they still have Maine in early November. But, maybe the South Carolina game.
If they don't beat Auburn, they're not going to make a bowl game.
South Carolina. I think South Carolina at home is easier, just because playing at Jordan-Hare can be a little tough. Given how last week went down with Hugh Freeze's comments after the game, and then Bo Wallace coming out and trashing him, I'm curious how the fan base reacts to that. But if Auburn is there, loud and proud, then I think it'll be tougher than South Carolina at home.
I agree with that a little bit, but I think the way that South Carolina is able to take care of the football, and they've looked really good on offense, their defense is pretty good too. I don't know how, I think they can outscore. Like, I think for OU this season, if you get to 20, especially if OU's on the road, if you get to 20, that might be enough to win the game. Red River is going to be weird, so I'm excluding that. But especially against a team like Mizzou, like Ole Miss, especially South Carolina, if OU gives up, 4 touchdowns, I think that those games are over. I do think that if OU loses this game, that is the beginning of the end of Brent Venables. I would say that.
Yeah, good for them for just extending them. Great foresight.
Okay. Let me get out of that. Okay. So for the SEC as a whole, at this point, it's pretty clear that there's 5, maybe 6 teams. I'd say 5, a top group of 5 that's really separated themselves.
Yep.
Mizzou, I think, is a good team, but that would kind of be the 6th team for me. I think Mizzou and LSU, if they really pull things together down the stretch, they got experience, or they got quality quarterbacks. They've got good skill talent. Questions for both defenses, especially for LSU now with Harold Perkins out for the season. Granted, I think they've misused him so much for the past 2 years. I don't even know how big of an impact that's going to have in a negative sense.
Could you imagine if he had just come in 2022, you would have him and Anthony Hill right now? It would be so cool. It would be so much fun.
Yes, it would. I am interested to see what happens with his career after this season, though, just because I feel like they've kind of killed a lot of his NFL draft stock and hype since his big freshman year. But anyway, Okay, so my SEC championship game pick has actually switched since we made our picks during the preseason. Um, I'm at this point going with Texas Tennessee. I think that Tennessee is a really good team. This is the most well-rounded Tennessee team since I was maybe like 3 years old, when they won a national championship. So um, I think that Tennessee is really good. I think that game against OU last weekend was more of like a 21-point game than a 10-point game. OU's defense is really good at forcing turnovers, and I think that Tennessee probably should have run the ball a little bit more than they did. Um, that said, I think that Tennessee has a very advantageous schedule for the rest of the season. I think that it's really advantageous to them to be able to see Alabama and Georgia play this weekend, because now I think that'll help them with their game planning a little bit more. They still got Alabama on the schedule. That's still going to be a difficult game. But I could see them at this point making it through to the SEC championship game with how good they are, especially in the trenches. Them going to Georgia in November is always a tough one, but I think they'll probably win one of two between Alabama and Georgia. I just think that Georgia's going through such a meat grinder this fall that eventually they're going to get tripped up somewhere. And I think Tennessee really only has a chance at 2 losses because the rest of the SEC schedule is really favorable. They get Kentucky at home, Florida at home, Mississippi State at home, Vanderbilt and Arkansas on the road. And then you got the Alabama and Georgia games. So, I mean, that's my pick. Texas, Tennessee.
Yeah, I think whoever ends up, it's going to come down to some tiebreakers. And so I know the SEC released their tie-breaking procedures, and it gets a little, the waters get muddied the further down you go. And just so Andrew, I know at the top, we're in agreement that Missouri is fraudulent. But so the past 2 weeks, not this week, but the past 2 weeks, when there was 6 of the top 7 ranked teams were SEC teams: Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Missouri. I put together how many of those teams play each other. And so obviously with 6 teams, you can only play 5 of them. Georgia plays 4 of the 5. Bama plays 3 of the 5. Tennessee plays 2 of the 5. And Texas, Ole Miss, and Mizzou play 1 of the 5. And for me, I think Mizzou has kind of proven they're fraudulent with how they played against Boston College and Vandy at home. So then that leaves Texas and Ole Miss, who only have 1 game against the top 6. And so I'm going to change my pickup to Texas versus the Ole Miss Rebels. That said, I think you make a good point about Tennessee. I think Tennessee could easily be 7-1 in conference play with a Texas and with an Ole Miss, and then it'll come down to some tie-breaking procedures. And I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia went 3-1 in their 4-game gauntlet as well. So it's going to be really interesting down the stretch. But given the schedule and given what we've seen out of Texas and Ole Miss, I think those two things pair really well together. And see a little Sark Kiffin duel with Saban giving his pregame thoughts. That would be pretty fun to watch.
Tarek, what are you keeping your?
I haven't changed Texas, Alabama.
Okay. Shane, to your point about Ole Miss, I do think that they have a clearer path than I would have originally expected, just because.
I should add though that I want that to happen because Sark needs to beat DeBoer for something that matters.
That's fair. Yeah, I think we all want to see that. For Ole Miss, the reason why I have a little hesitation for them, Shane, is they have a 5-game stretch between early October and early November that I think is going to be pretty difficult to navigate. They have South Carolina on the road, LSU on the road in back-to-back weeks. Could they come out of both those with wins? Sure. Do I think that they will? Probably not, because both of those stadiums get really weird to play at, especially this season with South Carolina being better and LSU, just no matter who they're playing it close. LSU finds a way to make every single game interesting, which is crazy because I think that Garrett Nussmeier might. I don't mean to bring this ESPN type talking point on here, but Garrett Nussmeier might be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. He probably is.
I agree with that. I held that sentiment at the beginning of the season. I think LSU kind of flat out stinks though too. I think LSU and Missouri are just not very good football teams.
I think LSU's starting to cook with something a little bit on offense though, with Caden Durham running back.
Caden Durham's really good, but I mean, they were tied with UCLA at halftime, and UCLA.
No, I agree. I think that there's some really concerning things that happen, but
Yeah,
the
I think
offensive lines.
I think LSU's played 4 bad games to start the season, and the fact they're 3-1 and they played 4 bad games, that could be a sign that they're pretty good. But I don't know. I don't. Playing in Death Valley is tough nonetheless, but.
That's
Yeah.
my thing. I think that they're going to find a way to bring teams down to their level, at least when you're talking about like an Ole Miss team that really isn't going to be tested a whole lot before then either. The South Carolina game being their best road test.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a really tough environment for them. And they still have to play Georgia at home and Arkansas on the road. Arkansas Ole Miss always gets weird too, it feels like. I mean, still in recent years, I could see that Arkansas Ole Miss game being really weird too. Arkansas, again, is a team that's going to be difficult to stop. They can find different ways to beat you, even with that good Ole Miss defensive line. All right, let's cap this. Let's cap the video with this. Who do y'all have as your 4? Or we can go all 5. We can throw the G5 one in there too. Who do y'all have as your 5 teams getting into the playoff as the conference champions?
Texas, Utah, Ohio State, Miami, and
UNLV.
Well, I that's the thing. I don't really know with these other conferences, but
that's fair.
I guess I'll say NIU because
Oh, sure.
Why not?
I think they're still in the mix.
The ones that matter. And then with do you want me to do remaining teams or?
No. If you wanted to throw a few of the other ones you think are in the mix, sure. But I was just going for the conference champions.
I think any of Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee can win the SEC. So, but I think I think all 4 of those teams will be in the playoff.
That's fair. If y'all want to see what the All-State playoff predictor says,
out of the Big Ten, I think both Ohio State and Penn State will be in the playoff. Out of the ACC, Miami, and I could see Clemson maybe sneaking in there.
Clemson's going to need some help, but yeah, I could too. I could see them getting in with 1 loss. Well, I mean, they'd have to.
The only person that can't get in at this point is Florida State.
Yeah, it's true. NC State. But, all right, Shane. Who do you got?
I mean, I agree with the top 4. Texas, Ohio State, Miami, and Utah. And then I'm gonna go. I just think Ashton Genty is so good that I'm gonna go with Boise State. I would keep an eye on the service academies, namely Army and Navy, who are actually throwing the ball a little bit. I think Army's playing right now, actually. So this could age poorly if they're losing to Temple.
No, they're beating Stan Drayton pretty good last I checked.
Okay, yeah, 28-6 after 3. I think Army and Navy, Army first year in a conference, winning it, that would be something crazy. Also to look out for, Army and Navy, there's a chance they play they're in the AAC, correct?
I don't remember if both of them joined yet. I know
they are. They're in the same conference, whatever one they're in.
Because Army just recently joined. Yeah, I didn't know if that was this season or next. I guess if they're playing Temple,
so there's a chance that they play in the AAC championship the week before the typical Army Navy game, which would be if you want people, if you think people are already up in arms about like the 12-team playoff and realignment and all that. Just have Army and Navy play on back-to-back weeks, and that crowd is going to go absolutely insane. But I would watch out for them. I'll just give Ashton Genty and Boise State the nod. But I know everything I said about Georgia. How probably one of the tougher SEC schedules, but especially if they can win on Saturday, it would not shock me Kirby Smart just finds ways to win. It would not shock me if Georgia worked their way into the SEC championship game and once again, held the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. But
yeah, I mean, I had Georgia as the SEC champion in my playoff. I do weekly playoff predictions on the site every Monday. I had them during the preseason and after week 1, but after the Kentucky game, I had to bump them down a little bit, just validated some of the concerns that I had about them during the preseason. I'm going to go 1A, 1B for the Big 12, and almost I think that a lot of people are just kind of just sweeping Utah into the Big 12 champion or to the Big 12 championship slot, but UCF has a pretty advantageous schedule, and they're not a bad team. They avoid Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas State, and I don't even know if they played BYU. I mean, BYU beating Kansas State, what was that, 38-9 or something like that? Was something I didn't really see coming. That said, we could be looking at a battle of the Mormons for Big 12 supremacy this year. So I'll still stick with Utah, but I think UCF, if you guys see there the 36% chance, that's because of their schedule. If they can beat Florida here in what is that, a couple of weeks? I don't even. When is that game?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Oh yeah, you probably got a lot of friends interested in that game.
Yep.
But yeah, and then the Iowa State game. Them going to Iowa State's probably going to be their biggest challenge for the rest of the season. So if they can win those, then I think that they have a good spot to get in. Granted, you still got to win the Big 12 championship game. That said, I think the I'll hold you to that. And then I think for the highest rated G5 champion, I would agree with Boise State. I just think that them playing Oregon close, if they can win out and win the Mountain West, probably the best non-P4 conference, that they'll be in a good position.
You think who?
Who'd
you say?
Boise for the
Boise.
highest rated G5.
Okay. All right.
I think my backup there would probably, I mean,
if the G5 cannibalizes itself, which would take a lot of work considering it's 5 conferences, then Liberty might slide in. They might be like the ranked 26.
I haven't been that impressed by them, honestly.
I haven't either, but their schedule is just such a cakewalk that if they go 13-0, they'll probably be like number 22 in the country. And there's a slight chance that could happen.
James Madison has been pretty good, and they just scored 70 against UNC in what might be Mac Brown's last year there.
Yeah.
No doubt. I could see potentially that happening too. But anyway, I think we're getting wrapped up here. So anything else that y'all want to say before we get going?
Hopefully another stress-free weekend watching on the couch.
2 years straight of going 5-0, and let's go 6-0 in Dallas.
Big.
Yeah, and
be prepared for the kickoff time though. Probably the first 3:15 local kick in a long time. So maybe ever, honestly.
Yeah, it's gonna be hot again on Saturday. I think like mid-90s. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, for Andrew Miller, Shane Black, Tarik LaCour, Hook'emHeadlines.com, Hook 'em Horn Show. That's pretty much it.
Hook 'em.